For mine, I have chapter 17 where the base surrenders and Ripper kind of decides that he doesn't want to give up the code, and so he doesn't want to face torture. And Mandrake's kind of trying to convince him to give him the code. So for the first scene, I kind of started off with the men and the process work of them. I just kind of started off with the silhouette of them, showing how I wanted them to stand. And then I went on to like the final version of them, just kind of showing the shapes of them and giving them boots. And then I just kind of added lines to give detail to their uniform. And I kind of started off with the colors of blue and green, but I ended up not using those just because they seemed kind of more fun colors together. They didn't kind of depict the emotion of the actual scene. And so for the setting of the first slide, I have buildings that are just portrayed that the men are coming out of, that they're surrendering from. And then I ended up just changing them all to be green and adding some detail by adding the doors and windows and then putting them on top of the buildings with their hands up. Then for the next one, I showed the Russians on the other side, showing who they're surrendering to with their guns. And I ended up making them orange, using that as my final color because I felt that kind of worked better than the blue. And then I added lines for the grass, and then for my first final scene, I just kind of added more detail to the buildings, giving windows and lines for more detail. And then for the next slide, it involves Ripper and Mandrake. So for the process work of Ripper, I just started off with simple shape of his head using ovals for his hair. I used a triangle for his mouth to kind of show how he holds his cigar and giving him wrinkles to his head. And then there wasn't very much process work that I used for either of their outfits, so I just kind of outlined them and showed how I put them together. And then the same kind of went for Mandrake's face, except for, I knew for Mandrake I wanted to use a mustache, and I started off with a crescent, but it kind of just looked like he was frowning instead. So I ended up just leaving it as a rectangle. So for this scene, I just started off with the room, making the walls and adding the door. I added a chair and rug out of rectangle and ovals, and then I added X's to the couch to kind of give it depth and make it look more like a cushion. And then for the final scene, I just put Mandrake and Ripper in talking, and this is kind of where Mandrake's trying to convince him to give him the code, and you can tell the emotion on Ripper's face of what he's about to do. And I added a picture on the wall and put the gun next to Ripper. And then for the last scene, I kind of decided to do a split screen of Mandrake talking to him on the outside of the bathroom. And so I started off with Mandrake kind of zoomed in and gave him a speech bubble, tilting his head, kind of acting concerned. And for the next slide, I decided to change the background to white, and I ended up giving Mandrake a mouth, because it kind of shows that he's more worried and talking to him. And then I started off for where Ripper's at. I was going to show the whole bathroom scene with the sink and door and toilet and everything, and I ended up doing a more zoomed up version of him committing suicide, looking in the mirror. And this is where the last final scene is. And I didn't really know how to depict him committing suicide without literally showing it, because they don't show it in the movie. So for that, I just had him looking in the mirror. here, kind of make it show reflective and shows his emotion on his face. And so for my final scenes, this is my first one.
I think you did overall a good job, but the mustache on Mandrake, it looks just kind of like a mouth in every scene besides this one.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to like change that somehow.
Claire?
I think it's fine that you actually showed him committing suicide because, I mean, we all know what happens, and without that, then the scene would have been pretty much not the scene at all, so I think you did good with that.
Jessica?
I really like your colors for one. I feel like it's a color combination that not a lot of people think of. But just as for your first slide, when the Russians are like creeping up on them, I think it may be more effective if you have the guns, like they're actually holding them, pointing it, because otherwise it's like, kind of looks like they're still like spying on them and they don't really know they're there
Well,
yet.
yeah, and I thought about doing that, but I kind of decided to put it on their back as a way of showing they're like holding back, confused that they're surrendering almost. Like,
Oh, okay.
You know, this is the second time I've heard about the Russians coming up on them. There are no Russians here. This is the U.S. Air Force Base being attacked by the U.S. Army. They're taking out the guy who's crazy. We're doing this. There are no Russians here. This is, you know, a very important part of the film. They have no option at this point but to send the Army after the Air Force. And there's even a little bit of banter around the table where people say, oh, you know, they'll never be able to take, you know, where the Air Force and the Army generals argue over whether or not the Army can get them. And of course, the Army gets them right away. What other comments or questions though about this part?
Yeah, just piggybacking off what she said, I would just make the guys creeping up the same color to show that it is their own men coming at them.
And they even, the soldiers even remark, where did they get the uniforms or something like that that looks just like our own guys or whatever. Okay.
That,
On that final scene too.
on this one?
The third one. Just going off, I do like how you showed when he's committing suicide, because I think a lot of things that people are struggling with this project, and I think I did too, was trying to take what they saw in the movie and exactly replicate it in the slides instead of kind of taking their own grasp on it. And I think that's good that you did that. But I think you could have depicted Mandrake a little better, because like Ms. Miller said, it's not a cartoon. So I thought the speech bubble kind of brings it more cartoony rather than, you know, a symbolistic type of image. So I don't know, maybe work around with it in final iterations.
Yeah, I think you can make this final scene much better, Madison, by going back to your original idea. The big point is that he's dead and he can't get the code, right? So rather than having him posed ready to commit suicide and then having to figure out something to do with Mandrake, we can make Mandrake's face very shocked, assume the gun has already been fired. You won't need the speech bubble. And I think you just need the body on the floor with a little bit of something that will represent blood dripping out of the head and the handgun somewhere near it. And that way you'll both get rid of the problem that Ben identified there. You'll be able to make a very shocked looking Mandrake that will express the whole thing. And we'll know that this is the bathroom that he went into. Because remember, Mandrake says to him, that's good, have a little wash up, it'll feel better and all that sort of stuff. And you had a nice bathroom scene depicted there, you just needed to drape the body on the floor of the gun and have it already done. And I think you'll get through all of the problems you need to work through with this one.
Okay.
Others? I guess the only other thing I would say is I might look at the shapes of their hair just a little bit and see if you can make a little less roundness, particularly on the sides. Because it tends to make, they tend, particularly with round eyes and perfect crescents for the closed eyes over here, you tend to have a little happier faces than what they really are. And that would be the only thing I would look at as part of the characters. Thanks.